It was early afternoon when I woke to the sound of laughter echoing from the kitchen, Jasmine's laughter. Sharp, polished, the kind that fills a room and still leaves no space for anyone else. I quietly sat on the edge of my bed, my hands folded in my lap. It was her party today, or as she called it, our family gathering, but deep down I knew. I was just an extra guest in my own home. Jasmine had been planning this event for weeks. Every corner of the house sparkled. Even the flowers were imported, hand-picked to match her color theme. She wanted everything perfect, everything except me. When I stepped into the kitchen, she was arranging plates with that cold efficiency of hers. "Oh, Martha," she said without even looking up. "I need you to just help serve today, all right? Don't worry about talking to the guests, just make sure everything runs smoothly." Her tone was polite on the surface, but every word sliced like glass. I nodded silently. I'd been through worse. After all, she was my son's wife. For Eric's sake, I'd learned to swallow my pride. As I stirred the stew on the stove, my husband's favorite recipe, one that used to bring the family together, I caught my reflection in the pot lid. A tired woman, wrinkles deep from years of holding back tears. I whispered to myself, "It's just one night. You can do this." By evening, the house transformed into a palace of laughter and perfume. Guests arrived in glittering dresses, the men shaking hands, wine glasses clinking. I stood quietly in the kitchen, arranging food trays, while Jasmine floated from guest to guest like a queen. From time to time, she'd glance at me, making sure I wasn't in the way. Her eyes said everything her smile didn't. When one of her friends asked, "Oh, is that the caterer?" Jasmine hesitated, then nodded slightly. Something inside me twisted. Caterer, not mother. I kept serving, forcing a smile as I passed around plates, my heart pounding behind it. Every laugh from the other room felt distant, like I was standing behind a glass wall no one wanted to look through. And yet, despite it all, I was proud of one thing: the food. The smells of roasted herbs and homemade bread carried memories of warmth and love. As I placed the last tray on the table, I looked up and saw Jasmine watching me, her expression tight, her jaw locked. That's when I realized this wasn't just a party. It was a test, and she was waiting for me to fail. The party was in full bloom now. Music played softly through the speakers, and laughter spilled out into every corner of the house. From the kitchen doorway, I watched Jasmine gliding among her guests like she'd been born for this kind of attention. Her gold dress shimmered, her smile flawless, rehearsed. I stayed in the background, arranging the last of the dishes on the counter. She had given me a list earlier, each course labeled and timed. "Make sure you serve the pasta after the appetizers," she'd said. "Not the stew. The stew is too heavy, too old-fashioned. It'll ruin the vibe." I remembered nodding, even though her words stung. That stew wasn't just a dish. It was a piece of family history, my husband's favorite, my son's childhood comfort. I had made it quietly anyway, a small pot, just in case Eric wanted to taste home again. Now, as I moved between the chatter and clinking glasses, my hands trembled slightly. I kept my smile soft, my presence invisible. But then I saw Eric standing across the room, laughing with Jasmine's friends. His suit was crisp, his hair perfect. For a moment I thought he'd look my way, but he didn't. "Mother, can you bring the next course, please?" Jasmine called, her tone sweet but sharp enough that people turned to look. I nodded quickly and hurried back to the kitchen. On the counter sat 2 trays, one of creamy pasta and one of the stew, still steaming. The smells mingled together, filling the air with warmth and memory. In my nervous rush, I picked up the tray with the stew and stepped out into the dining area. The guests clapped as I began serving bowls. What's this aroma?" one woman asked kindly. "It smells divine," another added. For a fleeting second, pride flickered in my chest, until I heard her heels. "Jasmine." She froze mid-step, her face tightening, her eyes wide with fury. "Martha." "What did you just serve?" Her voice cut through the laughter like a blade. Everyone turned. I blinked, confused. The stew, dear. It's your father-in-law's favorite. I thought, you thought? She snapped, stepping closer. I told you not to serve that. This isn't some backyard picnic. Do you ever listen? Whispers rippled across the room. My cheeks burned. I tried to explain, but my words stumbled. I just wanted everyone to feel. The next sound wasn't words. It was the slap. Sharp, instant echoing. The room fell silent. My tray slipped from my hands, the stew spilling across the white tablecloth, staining it deep brown. I didn't move. I couldn't. My skin burned where her hand had struck me. Jasmine stood there, chest heaving, her guests frozen between horror and disbelief. I told you, she hissed, voice trembling, not to embarrass me in front of my friends. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered. She slapped her own mother-in-law. My vision blurred as I turned slightly, searching for him, Eric. He was there, standing at the end of the table, pale, still. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. None. In that silence, I felt something inside me collapse. Not just from the slap, but from the weight of his stillness. My son, the boy I raised, the man I prayed for, was silent. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of them. I straightened, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, I said. It won't happen again. Jasmine rolled her eyes and stormed off, muttering about ruined nights and ungrateful help. The guests avoided my gaze. Some looked down at their plates, others mumbled excuses and left early. I stood there, surrounded by spilled food and fading music, feeling smaller than I ever had before. From the corner of my eye, I saw Eric move toward Jasmine, his hand on her shoulder, his head bent low as if comforting her. That was the moment I realized. My silence had made them believe they could treat me this way. And as I turned to walk back into the kitchen, my hands trembling, one thought burned deep in my chest. If my son wouldn't defend me, maybe it was time I started defending myself. That night, the house felt emptier than ever. The guests had long gone. The lights dimmed, and the echoes of laughter had turned into a hollow kind of quiet. I sat alone at the dining table, staring at the stain on the white cloth where the stew had spilled, brown and stubborn, refusing to fade, just like the shame burning inside me. My cheek still ached from Jasmine's hand. But what hurt far worse was my son's silence. I could still see it, his face in that moment, frozen, unsure. Not a word, not a hand raised, just silence, as if defending me might have ruined the picture-perfect image his wife had built. The clock ticked somewhere in the distance. Each second felt heavier than the last. When Eric finally walked into the living room, his footsteps were hesitant. He didn't look at me at first. "Mom," he began quietly, "you shouldn't have served that stew." I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. "Excuse me?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know how Jasmine gets about appearances. You could have avoided all this if you'd just followed her plan." My heart sank. "Eric, she slapped me. In front of everyone." He winced. "She didn't mean to. She was just stressed. You know how much pressure she puts on herself. She's been planning this for weeks." I stared at him, searching his eyes for the boy I once knew. The boy who used to stand up for kids who were bullied at school, who once said, "No one gets to disrespect my mom." But that boy was gone. In his place stood a man who couldn't even look me in the eyes. My voice cracked, soft but sharp. "So her pride is worth more than my dignity?" He said nothing. Just silence again. After a long pause, I nodded slowly. "I see." He muttered something about being tired and walked upstairs, leaving me sitting there with the broken dishes and cold air. The door to their bedroom shut softly, but to me, it sounded final. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that moment replay, the slap, the gasps, Eric's frozen face, over and over until my chest felt tight and my pillow was damp with tears. I thought about my husband, long gone now. He would have never allowed this. He used to say, "Martha, never let anyone make you feel small in your own home." But here I was, smaller than ever. At some point before dawn, I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. The faint smell of stew still lingered. I traced my fingers along the counter, remembering the years I'd spent feeding this family. Every birthday, every sick day, every late night. And yet, tonight, I was just a servant. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter, steadier. Resolve. I looked around the kitchen, my kitchen, and whispered to myself, "No more tears, Martha. Not one more." The sun began to rise, washing the house in soft gold. Upstairs, I could hear Jasmine's laughter again, faint and careless, as if nothing had happened. But for me, something had happened, something that couldn't be undone. Because that morning, for the first time in years, I didn't feel broken. I felt ready to start something Jasmine would never see coming. The next morning, sunlight crept through the thin curtains, painting soft lines across my worn kitchen counter. The house was silent again. Jasmine had gone out for errands, and Eric had left for work early, like always. For the first time in days, I could breathe without feeling watched. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at the table. My hand still trembled slightly when I lifted the cup. The bruise on my cheek was faint now, but inside, it still pulsed. The silence felt heavy, almost sacred. I let my eyes wander around the kitchen, the faded cabinets, the old clock ticking steadily. The spice rack my husband built by hand when we first moved in. Every corner of this space carried a memory. I don't know what made me open that drawer beneath the counter. Maybe instinct. Maybe longing. Inside, beneath a pile of old tablecloths and yellowed receipts, lay a small leather-bound book. I pulled it out, brushing off the thin layer of dust. My breath caught. It was his book. My late husband, Samuel, had written every recipe he'd ever loved inside it. Each page carried his handwriting, bold, neat, steady. The ink had faded in places, but the warmth it carried hadn't. As I flipped through the pages, I saw notes scrawled in the margins, tiny reminders, stories. Bits of humor. Add more garlic. Martha says it brings the flavor of home. Never rush a stew. Good things take time. And then, near the back, one small line written in his familiar hand stopped me cold. Someday, this will rebuild what's broken. Tears blurred the ink. I traced those words gently with my fingertips. Samuel had written that years ago, long before Jasmine, before the distance, before this ache in our family. It felt like he was speaking to me now. For a long time, I just sat there, holding that book like a fragile piece of my heart. Then slowly, I felt something new stir inside me. Maybe I couldn't fix Eric's silence. Maybe I couldn't change Jasmine's pride, but I could reclaim something that was mine. Something they couldn't slap away, shame, or silence. That afternoon, I began to cook, not for anyone else, but for me. I pulled out Samuel's recipes, each one a memory of warmth and belonging. The scent of spices filled the kitchen again, rich and comforting, wrapping around me like an embrace. When I plated the dish, a simple stew, the same one that started this whole storm, I felt proud. Not embarrassed. Not small. Over the next few days, neighbors began dropping by. One after another, drawn by the smell of home-cooked meals wafting from my window. "Miss Martha," one of them said, smiling, "you should sell this. People around here would love it. Sell it." The idea sounded impossible at first. But then Samuel's words echoed in my mind. Rebuild what's broken. That night, I opened a small page on social media. I named it Heart and Home Catering. I uploaded a few pictures of my dishes, simple captions, and one heartfelt message, made with love, served with memories. I didn't expect much, but by morning, the page had dozens of likes. Messages poured in, people asking for recipes, orders, compliments. For the first time in years, I smiled without forcing it. Little did I know, Jasmine would soon find out, and the control she thought she had was about to crumble. It started small. A few neighbors coming by for takeout plates, a few kind words shared around town. But within weeks, Heart and Home Catering became something much bigger than I ever expected. People said my food tasted like comfort, like memories they'd forgotten they missed. Photos of my dishes started circulating online. Warm stews, golden cornbread, pies that glistened under the light. Soon, I was receiving messages from across the city. Do you cater birthdays? Can you teach cooking classes? I didn't even have a fancy kitchen, just my small stove and Samuel's recipes. But with every order, I felt stronger and happier. But happiness, in Jasmine's eyes, was a threat. One morning, I heard her voice from the living room, sharp, irritated. Eric, have you seen what your mother's posting online? She's turning our family name into a food stall. I froze at the kitchen doorway, listening quietly. Eric sighed. She's just keeping busy, Jasmine. What's the harm in that? The harm, she snapped, is that people are tagging me. They think I'm part of this old-fashioned cooking nonsense. It's embarrassing. I have clients from high society following me. What will they think? Her words hit like a stone to the chest. Not because they were new, but because Eric didn't defend me. Again. That evening, when he came into the kitchen, he looked tired, uneasy. Mom, he started softly. Maybe it's time to take a break from the catering thing. Jasmine feels I turned to him before he could finish. Feels what? Threatened? Ashamed of me? He looked away. She just thinks it might affect our image. I laughed, softly at first, then bitterly. Our image? Eric, your mother was slapped in front of a dozen people and you said nothing. I think your image survived that just fine. He didn't answer. Just sighed and walked away. That night I cooked again. Not for customers this time, but to release the ache inside me. As the pot simmered, I thought about how Jasmine had tried so hard to silence me, and how the very thing she mocked me for was now bringing me strength. The next day, a local food blogger posted a video about me, the grandma chef who brings soul back to cooking. It went viral. Overnight, I gained thousands of followers. Orders flooded in. People wanted to meet me, taste my food, hear my story, and Jasmine saw it all. She stormed into the kitchen one afternoon, her eyes blazing. I told you to stop this nonsense, she shouted. You're making me look ridiculous. I looked up from my mixing bowl, calm but firm. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Jasmine. I'm doing it to heal myself. Her lip trembled with anger. You think you're some kind of hero now? You're just an old woman clinging to recipes no one cares about. I smiled faintly. Funny. Seems like a lot of people care. Her face flushed crimson. For a moment, she said nothing, then turned sharply and left, her heels pounding down the hallway. That night, I heard them arguing behind closed doors. Jasmine's voice high and sharp, Eric's low and weary. When the shouting stopped, I heard the sound of the door slam. Eric walked out, suitcase in hand. His eyes clouded with confusion and guilt. He didn't say where he was going, and I didn't ask. But as the door shut behind him, I realized something Jasmine never would. You can't destroy someone who's finally learned her own worth. The invitation came in a golden envelope, embossed, elegant and cold. Annual charity gala, it read, hosted by the very social circle Jasmine had fought so hard to impress. Her name was printed proudly on the list of hosts. My name, of course, was nowhere to be seen. Still, I was invited, as a silent courtesy, not as family. I almost didn't go. But something in me, something quiet and steady, said I should. Not for them, but for me. The night of the event shimmered with money and pride. Crystal chandeliers glowed like distant stars, laughter echoed off marble floors, and every woman's perfume announced her before her smile did. I arrived alone, wearing a simple dress, pale blue with lace sleeves Samuel had once loved. I felt his presence in that dress, like a whisper that said, "You belong here too." Jasmine stood near the stage, radiant in gold. She was laughing, her hand resting on the arm of a wealthy investor, her new business partner. When her eyes found me across the room, her smile faltered for just a second. "Mother?" she said through clenched teeth as I approached. "I didn't think you'd come." "I wanted to see your big night," I said softly. "You've worked so hard for it." Her lips tightened, but before she could respond, the event coordinator rushed over. "Mrs. Jasmine, we've had a problem with the caterer." Half the staff walked out. "The kitchen's a mess." Jasmine's expression hardened. "Then fix it." The coordinator shook his head. "We need someone who can manage the chaos fast." The room was buzzing. Guests were murmuring, hungry and impatient. I could see Jasmine's perfect image beginning to crack. And then, as if fate itself had turned toward me, someone whispered, "Isn't that the woman from Heart and Home Catering?" Dozens of eyes shifted to me. The coordinator's face lit up. "Wait, you're Martha!" "I've seen your videos. Could you possibly help?" I hesitated. Jasmine's glare was ice cold, but I stepped forward anyway. "I'll do what I can," I said quietly. The kitchen was chaos. Burnt sauce, broken trays, a disaster of pride and panic. But the moment I tied that apron, I wasn't Martha the scapegoat anymore. I was Martha the cook, the woman Samuel believed in. I commanded the room calm and sure. "Let's start fresh," I said. "Simple dishes. Honest flavors. We don't need to impress. We need to nourish." An hour later, the scent of roasted herbs and warm bread filled the hall. Laughter returned. Glasses clinked. People began praising the unexpectedly heartfelt food that reminded them of home. And then the host took the stage. "Tonight's meal," he announced, "was saved by none other than Martha Henderson, mother-in-law to our beloved Jasmine." "Please, a round of applause!" The room erupted in cheers. I stood surprised, blushing, unsure where to look. But Jasmine, she stood frozen, her painted smile trembling. I saw it then, the humiliation she'd once handed me returning full circle, not through revenge, but through grace. After the applause, she approached me, face tight with barely contained fury. "You had no right to take over," she hissed. "You made me look weak." I looked her in the eyes, calm, unflinching. "No, Jasmine. You did that yourself." She gasped softly, as if my words had cut through the last illusion she held. And then, in a moment that silenced the entire hall, she slapped me, hard, again. Gasps rippled across the room. Cameras flashed. The same woman who once humiliated me at a dinner party had just repeated her sin. But this time, everyone saw it, but I didn't flinch. I simply looked at her and said, "Some lessons echo until they're learned," the crowd murmured. Someone guided her away. Another woman gently touched my shoulder, whispering, "You don't deserve that." And for the first time, I believed it. That night the story spread everywhere, not as gossip, but as justice. The woman who was slapped twice and still stood tall, the slap that once broke me, had now set me free. The morning after the charity event was quieter than any morning Eric had ever known. The house, once filled with Jasmine's curated laughter and clinking glasses, now felt like a museum of pride, empty, echoing, and cold. He sat at the edge of their perfect marble counter, his head in his hands. The replay of the night before haunted him. His wife's mocking voice, the gasps from the crowd, his mother's trembling hands as people finally saw what he had refused to. For years, Eric had convinced himself that silence was peace, that keeping quiet between two women he loved would somehow hold the family together. But now, that silence felt like poison, one he'd fed his mother day after day. When he finally gathered the courage to visit Martha, his heart raced like a child walking toward a confession booth. Her small restaurant was glowing with the warmth he'd forgotten. Golden lights, laughter, the smell of her stew filling the air. Through the window, he saw her serving a group of neighbors with that same gentle smile she always had. The one that never demanded anything in return. He hesitated at the door. Then she turned and their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. "Mama?" His voice cracked, barely a whisper. Martha's hands froze on the tray she was holding. She looked at him the way only a mother could, half love, half ache. Slowly, she set the tray down and walked toward him. He fell to his knees before her. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I saw everything. I saw how she treated you, how I let it happen. I kept saying she was stressed. I kept telling myself you'd understand. But I was wrong. I let you be humiliated because I was afraid of losing peace at home. But all I did was lose you." Martha's eyes softened, but tears welled in them. "Eric," she whispered, "I never asked you to choose between us. I only wanted you to see me." He shook his head, guilt flooding through him. "I see you now, Mama. I see everything. And I hate myself for being blind." She reached down, touching his face gently. "You were never blind, son, just lost. We all get lost sometimes." He rested his forehead against her hand, tears falling freely now. "Can you forgive me?" Martha smiled through her own tears. "I already did long before you asked. But I hope you've learned that silence isn't kindness. Sometimes silence lets cruelty grow." He nodded, the weight of her words sinking deep into his chest. For the first time in years, they sat together, just mother and son, sharing a quiet meal. No bitterness, no shame. Just the taste of home and the sound of healing filling the empty spaces between them. Outside, the evening breeze brushed softly against the window. In the distance, a figure stood, Jasmine, watching through the glass. Her once perfect posture now slouched with regret. The world she built on control had finally crumbled. And now she stood in the cold, realizing what her pride had cost her. Inside, Martha looked up at her son and said softly, "Some lessons are hard, Eric, but the heart has a way of mending, if we let it." Eric reached across the table, taking her hand. "This time I'll protect what matters," Martha smiled, her heart finally finding peace in the same place it had once been broken. And outside, Jasmine's tears fell quietly, unnoticed by the world, but heavy enough to finally begin washing away her pride. Weeks passed, and the chill of regret softened into something quieter, something almost like hope. Martha's restaurant had become more than just a business. It was a heartbeat in the neighborhood. People came not just for the food, but for the warmth that came with every bowl she served. Children laughed in the corner booth, couples held hands, and strangers left as friends. Her story, once whispered in pity, was now spoken with pride. Every morning, she'd arrive before dawn, lighting a candle beside her late husband's old recipe book. The same one that had started it all. Its pages were worn, its corners stained with flour and broth. But to Martha, it was sacred. She'd trace her fingers over his handwriting and whisper, "We did it, John. Our recipes healed more than hunger." But one afternoon, as she wiped down the counter, the bell above the door chimed softly. When she looked up, her breath caught. It was Jasmine. She stood hesitantly in the doorway. No makeup, no designer clothes, no performance of perfection, just a woman stripped bare by consequence. Her eyes were red, her shoulders slumped, her pride visibly gone. Martha felt her chest tighten, not with anger, but with something deeper, compassion mixed with the ache of old wounds. "May I come in?" Jasmine's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. Martha nodded slowly. "Of course. Everyone's welcome here." Jasmine walked forward, her eyes scanning the cozy room filled with photos of smiling customers, newspaper clippings praising Mama Martha's kitchen, and one framed note, "Family is the recipe that never fails." I've seen everything," Jasmine began softly. "The restaurant, the people who love you, the way they talk about your kindness. And I realized, I spent so long trying to make you small because I thought your light made mine dimmer." Martha said nothing, just listened, her eyes calm but glistening. Jasmine took a shaky breath. "That night at the party, when I slapped you, I thought I was teaching you respect. But all I did was destroy my own." Her voice cracked. "I hurt you and I hurt Eric. And I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I had to say it. I'm sorry, Martha. Truly sorry. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Thick, heavy, waiting. Then Martha walked behind the counter, lifted a pot from the stove, and poured a steaming bowl of stew. The same one, the wrong dish that had started everything. She placed it gently on the table in front of Jasmine. Sit, she said softly. Eat while it's warm. Jasmine stared at the bowl, her lip trembling. This is the stew, Martha finished for her. The one you said didn't belong at your table. Jasmine's tears fell freely now. She picked up the spoon with trembling hands and took a slow bite. The flavor, rich, comforting, familiar, brought something undone inside her. For the first time in years, she didn't taste pride or control. She tasted love. Martha sat across from her, her tone gentle but firm. It's never been about the dish, Jasmine. It's about the hands that serve it. The heart that makes it. Respect doesn't come from perfection. It comes from gratitude. Jasmine nodded through her tears. I understand that now, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it. At that moment, the door opened again. Eric stepped in, his eyes softening as he saw the two women seated together. Without a word, he walked over, placed his hand on his mother's shoulder, then looked at his wife. Jasmine met his gaze, and for the first time, there was no pride, only remorse and quiet understanding. The three of them sat together, the silence filled not with tension, but with peace. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the street in gold. Inside, Martha smiled faintly and said, Sometimes the dish we think is wrong is the one that feeds the soul. And as laughter slowly returned to that small restaurant, it wasn't just the aroma of food that filled the air, it was forgiveness, second chances, and the simple, timeless recipe of respect.